All right. It is Thursday night. It is a little bit after 7 o'clock Central. And you guys know what that means. It is time for Conversations with Commodores. And I suspect a lot of you may recognize my guest tonight. He wore number 5. He played a whole bunch of positions for the Commodores in the early 80s. Keith Edwards. How are you doing tonight, Keith?
I'm doing pretty good, and thanks for such a. I don't even know who that guy is that you're introducing there.
Well, we're going to bring him back. We're going to talk about him tonight because he was a record setter, but more importantly than what he did on the field. And I have just had the privilege of meeting you tonight, but I want you to know I came to the campus in '86, in the fall of '86, right after your time on campus. But I want you to know that as a quarterback and an offensive guy, I knew exactly who you were. I followed your career. I was watching Kurt and Whit and everything that you guys did. And although our paths never crossed back in the day, I'm glad our paths have crossed this evening. So thank you for making some time for us.
Thank you very much for making the time as well.
Oh, glad. Absolutely. I can assure you, Keith, this is so much fun for me. I've been doing this for about a year and a half almost. And we're having Commodores from the 1960s, 70s, 80s, all the way up to the current team or the guys who just graduated. So I'm getting to meet guys from all generations. And our experiences may be different just based on our years, but there's so many common threads in here that a lot to share. And Keith, you got a bunch of folks who've rolled in that I need to tell you who's here and give you some shout outs. We got Jim Aguiano, who just had a birthday. Happy birthday, Jim.
Happy birthday.
Of your teammates, Bob Capobianco, is with us just to tell you hello. Let's see. And sometimes I can't tell who's in here because it rolls by too fast. But as they identify themselves, Keith, or say hello, I'll make sure that you know who's in there. And for folks who may not have caught up with you of most recently, talk about Compass Group a little bit and what you do before we head back to the good old days on campus.
Well, Compass Group North America, we are a food and facilities company, and we specialize in working with the educational institutions across the United States. We have parts of our group that actually provide food service for K-12 and higher education. And the specific business unit that I work with, we do facilities management. So we like to say we got a group that can feed them and we got a group that can clean up behind them. So we try to go in and make sure that the facilities are basically clean, safe, and healthy for all our students, especially in the K-12 industry, especially with all this craziness that has been going on with the coronavirus. So we specialize in going in and making sure that our students, our children, our next generation of leaders can go to a clean, safe, and healthy environment.
Well, gosh, especially during this pandemic with students either coming back to school or have been in school for most of the year, that's I bet you guys have really had to pivot and step up to assure your customers that what you guys are doing are providing in such a safe environment. But Keith, Kenny Cole says to tell you hello.
Tell him I said hello.
Mark Matlock says you're looking good, Keith. There's going to be a bunch of folks roll through here, I promise you. One of my teammates from Chicago, Dino, John Donardi, has just joined us. Hey, Dino. Talking, of course, with Keith Edwards, number 5, who set all kind of records on the field. But from all the accounts that I've heard and read about you, Keith, while you were special on the field, your talents, it was off the field that really set you apart as a teammate, as a friend, as a colleague. And I really wished our paths, as I said earlier, would have crossed back in the day, but I'm glad they are tonight.
Yes, sir.
Williston, Florida. Where is that, and how did you get from Williston to Big City? Tell us a little about your origin story.
Oh, man. Wow. You would have to bring that up. Williston is it's a little small country town in north central Florida, about 2,500 people. What a lot of people may know or may not know is I grew up butchering hogs and cows and loading hay and just working in an agricultural environment. And I guess I'll say that between my mom and my dad and just that environment, that gave me a lot of responsibility and a lot of respect for the hard work You go in, put in your time, and you just learn to appreciate hard work. And when I think back about the black and gold and some of those days out there, the 2 days, 3 days, felt like sometimes 4 days, you learn to appreciate that it's about going out there and just working hard and doing the very best you can, and then just kind of letting things happen as they do. So you mentioned about my origin. My mom and dad were both educators. They spent about 30 plus years rather, in the Florida education system. And one of the privileges that I had was graduating from high school where my father was the assistant principal. So not only did I get a chance to see him at home, I saw him at school too. So that also provided some very interesting times. Had to tell my friends, you're not going to get me in trouble because I got to go live with this man.
Now, if you guys geographically don't know where Williston is, it's really the shadows of Gainesville.
Correct.
Are you an hour from Gainesville?
I am 22 minutes from the Florida Gator Stadium.
How in the world did they let you escape Florida playing for Florida?
Well, I did have opportunity.
Parents stepping in.
No, my pops was a guy that he basically says, Keith, you make your own decision because you're going to get the glory when it turns out good. And I want you to be responsible for it. If it doesn't turn out good, you need to be responsible for that. I considered going to the University of Florida, but at that time, they wanted to move me to a cornerback. And I just really wasn't interested in it at that time. In high school, much like yourself, I played quarterback. And that's really what I wanted to do when I went to Vanderbilt. And so that's what Coach MacIntyre recruited me as. And so I did get a chance to play quarterback in my freshman year. But I got to tell you, Coach Watson Brown really helped me to become the player that I am because of his innovativeness in the offense that he put together. And I also wanted to give a shout out because I just spoke to him earlier today, Coach Dave Roberts. I don't know if many of the guys remember Dave Roberts, but I just talked to him earlier today. Between those two guys, and it's a lot of other coaches, but those two guys really had an impact on helping me to become the player I was inside of the offense.
Well, we're going to get to that 82 season in just a second. But coming out of high school, you consider Florida, but what schools were really hot after you? And what was it about Vanderbilt that eventually convinced you that that was the right place to go?
One, it felt right. Two, it was the academic environment. Coming out of high school, I wanted to be an engineer and I wanted to study engineering. And again, both my parents were educators. So it really was about education and being prepared for whatever opportunities you want to get after you graduated from high school. As far as recruitment, I had the opportunity. I was recruited by the University of Georgia, Ohio State, even Alabama came calling, Florida A&M as well. But at the end of the day, I felt like once I had a playing career and I wanted to move on to start taking care of my family and what have you, I just felt like Vanderbilt was going to be the place that was going to give me a solid foundation and give me a chance to sort of kind of live the life and live the lifestyle that I wanted.
What coach was predominantly the recruiting coach for you? Who recruited you?
His name was Monty Crook, if I remember correctly. I had the fortunate pleasure in high school. Again, I come from a small school, so I played football and basketball as well. And I'd look up sometimes at the basketball game and there'd be Coach Crook standing there in the corner by the bleachers. I was just like, can this man ever just go home? Why is he stalking me? But that's just the nature of the game. But he really recruited me really hard. But again, visiting campus, meeting the coaches, meeting some of the other players, again, it was just a no-brainer for me.
Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about your recruiting visit, your first time coming to campus. What were your impressions? Who did you have hosts? Do you remember some of the guys you met at the first visit?
I'm gonna be honest with you, it's a blur. All I remember is a little old country boy coming up into this big city of Nashville, Tennessee. It's just like, it's kind of overwhelming. And you're just like, wow. So I really don't remember who recruited me or who was my host at that time. I just remember this is the place that I'm going. Once I left that recruiting trip, I had made up my mind.
Could you have ever fathomed going the Nashville that you and I were involved with in the 80s compared to today's Nashville. Isn't that just incredible how it's exploded since then?
And I will say that one of the regrets I do have, I had a chance to come back to Nashville earlier in my career. I didn't take it. And that's one of the things that I will say that I do kind of regret, not going back and spending some more time in Nashville, because it was a really, really great city. Like I said, not only my teammates, but I met some people out in the community. I can't remember the name they used, but they used to have these families that would take us, during 2 days, and they would host us and take us to dinner. And I had a chance to really become real good friends and sort of have a mentor, Billy Webb. He was one of my hosts, and he sort of kind of stayed with me 30 years or so. Unfortunately, he passed years ago, but as long as he was alive, he'd come back from like South Africa or something crazy like that. And he called me up, well, what are you doing, Keith? I was like, working? What are you doing? Oh, I just got back from traveling.
Wow. Wow. Well, you remember maybe one of your teammates, I believe, Billy Rolfe. Remember Big Billy?
Mm-hmm.
His mom, who I believe worked in the administrative offices, they gave my family away from home. I was terribly homesick that first summer, and they were so kind to me. Billy just kind of took me under his wing and brought me home, and they fed me several times, and just whatever they could do to make my transition a little bit easier. And I'll never forget the kindness and the generosity of Billy and his mom and family. But I hear you. I understand what you're saying. I actually, you don't know this, but I'm from Dothan in the southeast corner of Alabama, just north of Tallahassee. So we're actually not that far apart. My town was a little bigger than 2,500, but I get it. I get it. But Keith, I didn't get to play for Coach Mack. Coach Mack was gone. I came in with Watson Brown's first class, but you got to play for Coach Brown when he was the OC in that magical 82 season. But he was my head coach a few years later. What was it about playing for Coach Mack that was so special? Because I've heard so many players, they get big grins on their face. They have nothing but kind things to say about Coach Mack. What's your impressions of playing for Coach Mack?
He loved us. He'd love you into wanting to do. It was just how he treated you. It wasn't about football for him. And for me, he wanted me to just be the very best version of Keith Edwards that I could be. And, he made you feel like you'd want to do anything that he asked you to do. So I know I probably get picked on because he had me at quarterback, he put me at receiver, and then he put me at running back. And it didn't really matter. As long as I was doing something that was going to be helping the team, and Coach Mack had asked me to do it, like I said, he just loved us into wanting to be the best that we could be.
Well, I will tell you, one of your former teammates who's just signed on thinks so very highly of you, and you're one of the reasons why he ended up at Vanderbilt. One of your co-Floridian offensive players. I'll let you have one guess. It rhymes with Dante Ferguson. Say hello.
Dr. Dante, how are you?
Dante was on the show several weeks back, and we had a great discussion, and he spoke very kindly of you back then as he does right now. So that's awesome. Well, Keith, what was your impressions, not of the campus, we'll get to that a little bit. You come from a very small town. You're a huge fish in a small town, or a small bowl, so to speak, at home. You come up to Nashville, you got Whit Taylor, you got just all of these awesome athletes on the same side of the field as you. How do you find your way? How do you find your place within there to help contribute?
Sorry about that. Are you there? Yeah.
Okay, we're here.
Good question. I probably would say, and I guess I think about something Tim Bryant said to me on Facebook. It's teammates for life. You get out there and you recognize that at that level, everybody has talent, and you're not necessarily trying to be the big dog. And it's also being able to understand that collectively, we're that team that can do a lot of things together. So it's almost like everybody understands what they have to do, the position that they're playing, they understand their assignments, and you just go get it done. So sure, at the beginning, it may have been a little overwhelming because, again, you are like, all of a sudden, you're surrounded by where you used to be the top talent on the team. Now you're like, you might be like just average, but that also made you want to be better. And you had teammates that would encourage you and want you to get better. So we all knew, and that was part of the reason that brought me there too, because we weren't having some really good success, early on. And so to be able to go from a team that may have only won 1 or 2 games and to sort of build it together so that we can get to the bowl game, that, like I said, that's that teammates for life. And that's what I think about, because it's the black and gold that would bleed forever.
Well, they tried you because of your athletic talents and ability to adapt to the game. I know that you were at several different offensive positions. You might even played a little DB, if I'm not mistaken, at one time. But how did you ultimately find a home at running back? Give us a little bit of that.
Wow. I think Ernie Goolsby, if I remember correctly, he was playing our fullback and he got hurt. I think he hurt his ankle. And so it's like Coach Watson Brown looked at me and it's like, okay, you're going to play fullback. So I don't know. You just make the adjustment and you keep going and you try to do the best you can. And, I knew Ernie was about like 6'3", 6'4", about 240, 250 or something like that. I wasn't going to be a big bruising running back, but I knew that I was talented enough to understand parts of the offense. And so having played quarterback, I was so used to understanding the entire scheme because that's what you do as a quarterback. And I just figured out, I'm not going to run you over. But I tell you what, within that first 5 to 8 yards, there weren't very many linebackers that were going to be able to cover me, and I can go get open and catch the ball.
Well, that's just it. You change the position. Frankly, we go from a big bruising type of traditional fullback to now everybody's fullback is the way Keith Edwards was in the mid-'80s. And I mean that with the highest of compliments and regards, because they figured it out. Watson, everyone would agree, is a pretty dang smart offensive coordinator. And to get you the ball, a record-setting 97 times in one season, showed 2 things to me. One, they had confidence in your abilities, regardless of where on the field, where in the downs and distance. But secondly, they knew they could trust you. They knew that when they got you the ball, you were going to do some good things. And I'm going to let you kind of think on that while I tell you who's rolling in here. Keith. Gary Gerson says you were the best teammate. Jeff Madden, one of the Vandy elite athletes, position player. I'm telling you, all kind of love for Keith.
Well, I do appreciate that. And like I said, Gary, say hello to him. And Jeff have followed his career too, as he was going on becoming what I call him the strength extraordinary guy. So I appreciate that. But, I think back to those days. And again, I give a lot of credit to Dave Roberts and Norman Jordan for helping become that player out of that position, as well as Coach Brown, because like you said, when people would ask me about the offense, I said, Coach Brown just created backyard football for us. And, I can remember times, we line up, it'd be Alomar, it'd be Phil, it'd be Chuck, Ardell Fuller. And, being able to just stand out there and look back at Whit or look at Kurt, and we just do the hand signals and we figure out what we're going to run based on the defense that's in there. That's fun ball, because you never can tell what the defense, they never can tell what we're going to do, but we might change it at the line of scrimmage ourselves.
That's what I was getting ready to say, Keith. You had 2 of the very best in Vanderbilt history who could spin it. Whit and Keith just knew what to do with the ball, and they got it to such talented guys. But I want we're going to stay on the field for just a couple more minutes. Take us into the huddle. Take us into a Whit Taylor huddle. And I know he had command of the team and the offense and the huddle, but you also have 5 or 6 extremely talented offensive players who are they want the ball every single play. And that's the way it should be. But take
Well,
us.
so in the huddle now, let's keep it real. You got them big offensive linemen up front. They know let's get this ball and move it down the field from the Hammonds to the Monacos to the Drawleys. And I know I'm forgetting some people, but we had a really good offensive line. But the thing that you brought up that I really want to talk about is that we believed in one another, and it wasn't about necessarily who was going to get the ball. It's going to be who's going to get the ball that's going to be taking the advantage of the defense. So again, whether it was Alomar running, I remember I went back and watched some film, him running a post route, beating a defensive back or a linebacker, or whether it's Phil catching the ball, or whether it's Chuck coming across on a crossing route. We just had a good time out there on the field. That's why I said it was much like backyard football. Just line up and just call the play, standing at the line of scrimmage. Don't even worry about it. I think we could have done a lot more no huddle if we wanted to, but inside the huddle, Whit came in there or Kurt came in there, and it's like, okay, guys, this is what we're going to do. And we all knew what our assignment was. And so we just went up to the line and got it done.
What was the most fun for you as a football player at Vanderbilt? What gave you the most joy or the most pride? And sometimes I ask this question in almost every one of my conversations. Sometimes it's not just what's on the field. It's not, it may have been a touchdown you scored against Florida, or it could have been something in practice. So take us to what makes you smile even to today.
I guess one of the things and I give a lot of credit to him, and I know I don't know if he's on here or not, just spending time in practice when Norman was my coach, so to speak. And I know people pick on me about this, being able to intellectualize the position, to understand nuances of the position. It's just something simple like we figured out as an A-back, our first step off the line of scrimmage dictated what that linebacker or that cornerback was going to do. And so just being able to understand not necessarily the physical aspects of what we did, but understanding how to mentally think about the game and you say try to change the game. So for me, as crazy as it sounds, it was really about the camaraderie and the practices with the other teammates, not so much about the game itself, because again, we knew we were going to perform. And as long as we kept performing, we knew we were going to win. Sometimes it didn't happen the way we wanted to, but, just going out there, being together and getting things done, that was a cool thing.
Capo wants to know how many different routes could you run off of a 60 hot route?
Well, let's see. Probably 4 or 5 at least. I don't know. That was really one of the best routes ever because, again, and like you said, Coach Brown trusting us with that and knowing that, again, no matter what that linebacker or that defensive back was going to do, he was going to be wrong because if he jumped on me, I can do a quick shake and go up the field on a post route. If he stayed inside, I could run an out route. So he was going to be wrong. He had to figure out what I was going to do. But once he sat there and he made a decision, I was going the other way.
Well, Keith, if you can recall, it's one thing in playing in high school in front of your hometown people, or even on the road in the state of Florida where the crowds could be pretty good and hostile. But it's not like playing in the SEC, going to Tuscaloosa, going to Athens, going to Knoxville. What were the crowds? Did they impact you at all, or did you just kind of drown that out and the field is the field and that's what was important?
I would say for the most part, the field is the field. Once you got out there with your teammates, you kind of knew what was going on and what was happening. The only stadium that I played in that may have caused me to think a little bit was playing in LSU. That was one of the tougher games that I remember playing down in that stadium. University of Tennessee's stadium didn't bother me. Maryland Stadium didn't bother me. Because again, once you're on the field, I usually just tune that out and try to tune into what's going on the field and work and doing my assignment.
Sure. All right. I have to ask about the plane flight on the Kansas, or was it Iowa State game? You remember this? Had to circle. Were you on that plane? This was in about 82 or 83. You'd remember it if you were on the plane. It may not have been one of your years, but it was the flight because of weather. They had to take 3 approaches to land and couldn't land, had to go over, I think over to St. Louis or Kansas City to land. You would remember it, but I wasn't sure if you were on that flight.
I mean, that's the time that I was playing, but I don't remember that flight. I
Gary's
do.
the Kansas game at
Yeah.
Kansas.
I don't remember that, but I do remember riding a bus to play the University of Memphis, and I can't remember his first name, Gilmore. Him telling jokes like for 3-4 hours while riding on the bus. So, and like we just had a good time, even though it was a long bus ride. I just remember, again, a group of guys just traveling down the highway to go play a football game and having a good time on the bus with each other.
Well, and I know you're a proud guy, but I also have learned that you're not a boastful guy, but I'm going to do that for you. And that's why we're here tonight a little bit. This is the place to do it.
Okay.
If I'm correct, you ended your career with 200 career receptions. And at the time, it was the SEC leader. You were the SEC leader for a career. It since has been broken by several, including two of our own.
Correct.
Jordan Matthews, I think, broke it. I don't know what the numbers were, but Jordan Matthews broke it. And I am drawing a complete blank. Who's the other fella? Oh my gosh, Earl Bennett. Thank you. What did that mean to you at that time? Or did it register with you that you were at that time the career SEC receiving receptions for a career leader?
It did not register with me at that time. And when it did register with me, imagine this, I was having a conversation with a group of students in a classroom, and the young man's like, you're no football player. And so I challenged him to look my name up because I hadn't even looked at it. And I said, like, well, look on the internet and see what you can find, see if you can find Keith Edwards. And he looked it up. We kind of looked it up together, and that's when I saw it. But outside of that, I really didn't think about it. I think it was one game, I think it was in Kentucky, where I think they told me it was either 17 passes or something. I don't remember what it was exactly, but those accolades are good when you get to be old and you're trying to convince your children that you really did play football.
I'm going there next, but keep going.
But outside of that, the thing that registers with me or resonates with me mostly is the games, the camaraderie, and like I said, thinking back, I'd like to say the '82 season. There were a few plays in there that we had the plays done a little differently, gone a different way. We would have the only game I think we might have really lost was the North Carolina game. I think we got beat up pretty good in that game, but those other ones, we were so close. We were right there. As a matter of fact, and I'll get off task for a second here. I actually called on a chief financial officer for a school who actually was sitting in the stadium when we were playing the University of Georgia in Nashville. And I think we were within a touchdown of beating them that year. I think Terry Hogue, one of those guys, knocked the ball for Joe Kelly or something like that. But I thought that was kind of interesting that I met a guy who was at the University of Georgia, and he was at that football game in Nashville.
Isn't that amazing, or isn't that interesting how your day-to-day life intersects with your past life, so to speak, and you never know when you're going to come across people who knew you from back in the day. That's
right.
Always a neat thing. But Keith, I, like everybody else, we have our memories from our days on the field, whether it's in games or practices, weight room, whatever. And you'll always have those. But most folks, when I ask the following question, their response doesn't have anything to do with football. But here's my question. You spent your time at Vanderbilt, you got your education, your parents being educators. I suspect that the off the field accomplishments were more important, or just as important as the on the field accomplishments, according to your parents. And now that you have children who are in their 20s, and it's a whole different generation, and they don't even know you played, grainy film, Dad, I can't even see you, kind of thing. But here's my question for you. this many years later, and I hate to date you, but it's been about 35, 40 years since you were on campus. What are some of the better memories that you have with your buddies, with away from football, from the times that you're eating pizzas or getting a beer or shooting pool or whatever it is that you used to do? Who are some of those buddies, and what are some of those fun memories that you have from college?
Well, I'm sure Dr. Dante would pick on me pretty good about this one. A very good friend of mine that lives over in Columbia, Tennessee, Manuel Young. We used to hang out pretty tough together because we both were in classes together. So I think we probably spent, it felt like almost 24 hours a day in capacity. There's another gentleman that's a really good friend of mine, and I'm glad you brought that up. I was telling my sons, I said, you really get a chance to have some really good friends as you develop those relationships. And so another gentleman, Kenny Brown, he was my roommate my freshman year. He left after 1 year and went back down to Florida. He got homesick too. So I think we all dealt with that homesickness. But, the thing that I've realized, especially here over the last year or so, is even though we have gone on and everybody's gone on and done whatever they're going to do in their lives, sometimes it's about picking up the phone or reaching out on Facebook and just say, hey guys, how you doing? And so that makes me feel good that I can still do that, and people know who I am, and I can do things for them and they can do things for me. And just recently here, I was planning on headed up to Chattanooga, Tennessee. I was going to hang out with Ken and Mark and Greg for some lunch. Unfortunately, I got redirected with my job back down to Florida. But, just being able to catch up with the guys and just having some genuine conversations, because now we are adults and we can have conversations, and to see how we all have evolved as young men or old men now, but just as men in general, and how we've, taken those lessons that we learned on the field and we're applying them in our lives, whether with our families or with some of us in coaching, some of us in church, some of us are just doing things just to kind of, take care of our community. So my memories are just being able to, reach out to the guys and say, hello, hey, how you doing? Appreciate your help. Thanks a lot. If there's anything I can do, if you're ever in North Carolina, if you're ever in Florida, please reach out to me. Let me know how I can help you.
Tell me if this resonates at all. You can get together with those guys over beers or a lunch or something, and you'll be adults for a little while, but then you're going to resort back to that 19 and 20-year-old version of you, and there'll be laughs until y'all are crying. Am I right?
It does. Again, like you said, and especially because those are the guys that are going to battle with you on the football field, and they've seen you when you were that 19 or 20-year-old, and see you as this adult. But forget being an adult. Let's just have some fun together. Let's just be who we really are together, because we can trust each other.
Now, where did you live on campus your years?
I think they tore them down with the Carmichael Towers.
Two, I think, are down, and two more are coming down this next month. And I think that during the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and maybe even beyond, that's where most of the upper class football players live. But I think in the last several years, they've been able to move off campus as a choice as well. But you lived in the Towers?
Yeah, freshman. Of course, we lived in, Branscombe, Quadrant.
Yep. I lived in Lupton, that part of Branscombe.
So we did that. And then, like I said, once we moved over to the Towers, that's where I spent the majority of my career, in the Towers. So I do remember that.
All right. Now I got to ask you, now during my time, I'm with Boo Mitchell. I'm with Dante. I'm with Tony Piercy. I'm with Mark Johnson. That's my era, a little bit right behind you. But I know that Boo and a couple of those guys came in when you were on your way out. Did you ever attend parties on the weekends in the Towers?
Let's see. I could plead the fifth, but I really don't remember.
Hey, it's just me and you here. The statute is long gone on that. But
I'm sure I did. But like I said, I probably toward the end of the career there, I probably was really trying to focus on make sure I got all the things together to get out of there, because it was about time to say, okay, you're about to be an adult. But I had as much fun as anybody. Responsible fun, that is.
When football got to be too heavy, when it was at the time, we didn't have time limits per week on how many hours we could be over at McGugan or doing our responsibilities. But where was a place that you could kind of disappear to? A lake, the park across the street, a restaurant? Did you have a place that you could unwind, get away from all of it?
On the weekend, it usually was, when you weren't football in Centennial Park, I go there. I actually got a chance to know a few people in the community, so you could kind of go over to their houses and visit with them. But for the most part, I didn't get a car until maybe my junior year or something like that. So there wasn't a lot I didn't do a lot of leaving a campus unless I had someone come and pick me up or something like that. So mostly just kind of hanging out. What was that? And I think up on in the towers, we actually had like a game room that had a pool table or something like that. So we could kind of, chill out that way. But for the most part, I think we stayed on campus, or at least I stayed on campus.
You remember a place called Sub Base?
I remember it, but I don't remember hanging out there very often.
One of the Keystone Cops says to tell you hello. Remember Billy Smith?
I do remember the name.
Well, Billy has just joined us and says to send his regards to you. Guys, I'm talking with Keith Edwards. We're trying to relive some glory days in the 80s. Now, I know that once you finished your career at Vanderbilt, I guess I'll ask it, not assume anything. Did you have your sights set on playing professional ball on any level?
I guess in the back of your mind, you do have aspirations. But the honest answer is, after I'd finished with Vandy, I have sort of kind of a little football burnout. I did know that, because when you give a lot of yourself, you sort of kind of, it takes a mental toll on you. But I did get a chance to play exhibition season with the Green Bay Packers. I did do that. Got cut. I was on the last cut, so I was almost there. But I look back on it and I said it was a good experience. I don't necessarily know if I would have thoroughly enjoyed playing professionally. I don't know. But I made up my mind. It's like, okay, I've done that, got that off my back. I also got a chance to go play in the Canadian League. That definitely wasn't for me. I just couldn't wrap my mind around that whole game at that time. And so I said, you know what? I have my engineering degree. I'm just going to go back home and start my career.
It's interesting. One of the things you just said about burnout, many former players mention that by the time they graduate and all their eligibility is over and they're finished playing in college, they're a little bit relieved. And I don't know if that's necessarily would apply to you, but it's burnout, I guess, is the best way to describe it, where they'll step away from the game. They may not go visit, may not go to any games for a while, or don't come back to campus. And it's not necessarily that they're upset about something. It's just they're done with it. And they want to move to maybe the next phase of their life. And you had your engineering degree. Did you go into engineering after you had those brief stints with the pros?
I did. I actually worked in Tennessee for a food manufacturing company over in Chattanooga, Tennessee, in that area. So I did that for a while and got my feet wet and started to understand the demands that engineering could put on you. And that was one of the first places that I recognized that inside the curriculum at college or in the university, they give you a lot of abstract theory. You really have to make sure that you can apply it when you get out there in the field, because again, I think back to in those books, all the variables are controlled inside the books in order for you to get an answer out. But when you're out there, you have to figure out what the answer is. You got to figure out the conditions. You have to really use more than just what you learn inside the classroom. You have to use your whole self, I'll say it that way, in order to figure out what's going on inside of a plant.
There could be a parallel made there with the way you learned the playbook in the meeting room. It's
Right.
not the way it's applied on the actual field, and you had to think
Yeah.
outside of what you had been taught, but still using those principles. I don't know if there's a good connection there, but it just seems like it might be appropriate with a parallel between playing football and applying the basics or the principles from engineering. Am I off there, or do you see something there?
I see the connection there, and I hadn't thought of it that way because, again, one of the things I know in practice we would do is intentionally, Coach Brown, Coach Roberts might create the worst defense that you could run a play into. They would all practice that. So they get conditioned to know what to do without really thinking about it. But back to what you said, as far as when you play the game, you can't control how that defender is going to react or respond. But you have to be confident enough in what the play is and your abilities to know that you can make the adjustment. So if you take that and put that into a working environment, again, you don't know what conditions you're going to find until you get there. But you have to be, I guess I say, savvy and smart enough to understand that, okay, I can analyze the conditions. I know what I need to do. How can I make this work, or how can I take advantage of this? I guess that's how I would look at it.
Oh boy, Dante's all over you right now, Keith. He said you were the worst senior sponsor of any undergraduate. What you made him do is unmentionable. You made him carry you made him carry your stool to the meetings in the gym. How dare you? How dare you be that way?
I plead the fifth.
No, in fact, obviously, I'm kidding. Dante says that you were awesome, and you didn't make him do a whole bunch of other crap that a bunch of older guys made the freshmen do. Guys, I'm talking with Keith Edwards. We got just a couple more minutes. Keith, if I'm coming out of high school, or I'm a sophomore, junior, and I want to play in the SEC, and Vanderbilt's on my radar. Let's assume this is one of your children. What are you telling that child, that student athlete who may have a chance to come play at our school, why that may be a good place for them?
Interesting question. What I would probably say to my child, or any student that I've talked to before, is choose a school that you want to go to that has the education, has the curriculum that you want first. Then you look at the school, the football team, if you have a chance to go there. And I'll stop there for a second, and I'll have this story. I have my youngest son, who is about 6'3". Not a very fast kid, but he runs routes. He played football in high school. He ran them like Fred Biletnikoff. So he was a very talented kid that could catch the ball. He had super sticky fly hands. And one day I was watching him practice, and basically the conversation went, he said, well, Dad, I just want to play on the team. He says, I don't want to start. And so the conversation was one, I don't want you to get hurt because you're not fully invested in this. If there's something else you'd much rather do, let's figure that out. And so we had a conversation that evening, and there was something else in school he wanted to do. So the next day we went, turned his equipment in, and he went on to, do the things that he wanted to do. Right now, he's an aircraft mechanic in the Air Force. So my goal has always been, whether my kids or kids that up under my tutelage, for lack of a better word, do what's in your best interest, not necessarily what you thought Daddy would want you to do. So didn't try to push either of my kids, or in this example that you gave me, I wouldn't push that kid toward anything other than you make sure that this is something that you want to do. Vanderbilt is a great school. If that's what you want to do and it meets all your criteria as far as what you'd like for your life to be like after you graduate from school, then by all means, let's attend Vanderbilt, because it is a great school.
They need to rip that right now and use that as part of the recruiting package. Couldn't have said it better. Keith Edwards, I'm so glad I got a chance to meet you and talk to you a little bit this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, Bernard.
Oh, I can assure you it's been my pleasure. And guys, one of the very best, number 5, setting records, but even better as a teammate, as a friend, as a classmate. That's why we do these conversations every Thursday night, 7 o'clock. We've got them lined up next couple of weeks, actually next several weeks. So please keep coming back. I hope as we get closer to football season, we'll have some conversation in our group about a big meetup for one of the home games and have a good time. But for now, be safe and anchor down.